Hello, today we're going to talk about anti-inflammatory diets and what that actually means. I got this question yesterday from Sierra Nicole. Please go follow her page. She's great content and she makes a lot of content around soul food and how soul food is incredibly important for Black people to eat and celebrate. So go check her out. But we were messaging about other random stuff and she was like, so let's talk about the anti-inflammatory diet. Let's discuss. Let's first break down what inflammation is and why you don't want it in your body. So, number one, inflammation can be redness, swelling. You can see inflammation in your face, puffiness. If you didn't get to sleep too well, sometimes the day after drinking, people look kind of inflamed. That would be inflammation. That inflammation can take place anywhere over your body. When you have recurrent inflammation or chronic inflammation, that can lead to chronic diseases. A lot of inflammation does stem from the foods we eat, but also the environments we live in, the type of exercise we do, the type of non-exercise we do, the type of movement we do in general, how we position our bodies can lead to inflammation, which could also just be due to overuse of muscles or joints or things like that. We see this with age. For example, arthritis is inflammation of the bones and joints. Itis in any word means inflamed. So when you see something like sinusitis, that's probably not the best way to say that. Your sinuses are inflamed. So that's a quick tool that I don't even know when I learned that years ago, but anytime I see itis and then a word in front of it, great way to understand what that disease is. So the reason the doctors are recommending this is because they know that chronic inflammation over time, which chronic means for a long period of time, can continue to possibly lead to disease. Not always, but a lot of the time. And even when we get much, much older, you'll see more and more people with inflammation of some sort just because our bodies are tired. We've been doing it for a long time. Makes sense. So oftentimes anti-inflammatory diets are recommended to older individuals as well, or people who are high risk for things like high blood pressure, heart disease, stuff like that. Inflammation is also linked to chronic diseases like cancer as well, just because anytime the cells in your body are being stressed or inflamed or your body is swollen or anything, that is outside of the norm of what they would like to do. So the more abnormal behavior that they exhibit, I can't even think right now, the more abnormal behavior they exhibit, the more likely it is that chronic disease could develop from that. But let's talk about some foods and drinks and things that could lead to some inflammation. Number one is alcohol. Nobody ever wants to hear that one. It's fun. People like to go out. I do think that there's a cultural shift around alcohol happening in general, though. So I think a lot of people are like, I don't need to do it. And that is the one thing that people know will lead to chronic inflammation if you're drinking over time. Alcohol also directly is impacting your liver, which is incredibly important for all your body functioning, and you don't want an inflamed liver. You just don't. The other main foods that can lead to inflammation are, if you were to Google it, it would say highly processed food. The issue that comes with that is that a lot of food that is processed doesn't necessarily equate to ultra processed bad for you. For example, if you were to get applesauce out of the store, which I have in my fridge right now, that is processed, but it's not going to be the same as if you were to eat a bag of Cheetos for every single meal for a month. Very different vibe. So when we think of the word processed, I think it's important to consider that processed doesn't always equate to ultra processed, which is very different, and that most things that we eat will be processed in some way as it has gone through a process of being cleaned, distributed, packages, all that stuff. But a lot of studies have shown ultra processed food, which is the big scary thing that I feel like a lot of people are talking about right now because of the current administration. That is what can lead to chronic inflammation. What I would like to point out though about these inflammatory foods is that they are very accessible, and they're often in places that are rural, they're often in places that are in the inner city, and they're places that are low income. That impacts everybody. So when we tell people just go on an anti-inflammatory diet, that doesn't actually help if the grocery stores, the corner stores, whatever food stores they have around them don't have anti-inflammatory foods. And on top of that, they don't have the time, money, or space to cook those foods. The last thing I'll say is that it's really important to remember that we are all individuals when it comes to our body. So what works for me may not work for you, especially when it comes to an anti-inflammatory diet. For people who struggle with IBS, certain fruits and vegetables may be inflammatory for them. For people who have allergies, certain fruits and vegetables could be inflammatory to them. That doesn't mean that the food is bad. It just means it doesn't work for you. So remembering to consider that when talking about food, when giving recommendations, when trying to figure out things that work for us, we have to consider. It's also why people like Sierra are really important in the time we live in right now, because it's not just about let's just go eat healthy. You have to have foods that are culturally relevant. You have to have foods that taste good, and you have to have foods that people want to eat. So I think it's really important to continue that thought when we're trying to get our anti-inflammation on. And I will say again, and this is what Sierra talks about, soul food in particular is one that is really rich in a lot of anti-inflammatory foods. And we all know why, but if you don't, propaganda around black foods makes us believe that our cultural foods are not rich in nutrients, which is completely incorrect. So the next time you're worried about an anti-inflammatory diet, go talk to your grandma, actually. I say this as my great-grandmother and grandmothers, both of them, all of them were always cooking greens. I grew up eating lots of freshly cut Honeycrisp apples. I grew up always having, they used to do kale greens, they would do collards, and also whole grains. We were mostly eating lean meat, turkey, chicken, all that stuff. These are things that are considered anti-inflammatory. So remember that. The next time you get recommendations for an anti-inflammatory diet. I can't even talk. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to my new mic. That's why I really wanted to make this video. Bye.